Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. We're all here, and we were facing a few little technical difficulties, but we are here and everything looks great. So we are here with Ivy Beratto, and Ivy, a architect, is going to speak with us. She's going to speak with us about spaces to move through the story of stress. And as it was a tiny bit stressful to get everything all set up, it's ideal for the tone of the topic this afternoon. But Ivy is a entrepreneur, a spiritual practitioner in terms of coaching and just the beauty that she brings to the table when she coaches and she shares. And it's really interesting, this topic, because spaces to move through the story of stress is a different way to look at spaces. But before we get started, I want to say hi to my co-host, Sara Jane. I don't want you to feel like I forgot you there.
No, I'm happy to be here on today's conversation with you both.
Yes. And spaces, Ivy, what I would love for you to start us off with is, how do you look at spaces? How do you look at spaces unlike the way people typically look at spaces? Can you hear us?
She seems to be frozen.
Okay. I think she's frozen.
I had that feeling from the beginning that she was frozen.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
There you go. Unfrozen and here in clarity. Beautiful. Thank you.
Hi. Yes, as you were saying, I normally compartmentalize my space, So depending on my mood and where I am, and then I will have a reaction to that space. So that's how I see it myself. The way I, when I was going through an ordeal, that's how I came about it. Because sometimes I used to face certain things in different spaces that I didn't feel the same impact like others. And sometimes when people look at me and ask me why do I feel the way I feel in that reaction, why I was having those reactions, that's when I started noticing that I had different impacts depending on the way I feel and how I react to those spaces due to the way I wake up, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ivy, I'm going to tell you to sit back a little bit too so we can see your whole face. There you go.
Okay.
Much better. Yes, we get to see your whole face, your beautiful face.
It's very difficult.
Yeah. So, Sara Jane, what are your thoughts?
I think very much in space in respect of the therapies and saying to people, if you are uncomfortable in the practitioner's room, if you're uncomfortable, it's just something that the energy doesn't feel right. And the same will go with the practitioner. If you don't feel comfortable with that practitioner, it doesn't mean that the practice isn't right for you. It just might mean that room, that person isn't right for you. Energies in rooms can be very different. Walk into houses. Some houses feel comfortable, feel like a home. And some houses don't feel like a home. There's something about the energy of that house that doesn't feel right to you. I've, on the whole, been very lucky. I've always had people walk into my home and say it feels like a home. So it can be down to the energy of the people rather than the energy of the place, because the place will take on the energy of the people. But it's not so daft to say that actually rooms, houses, buildings can have an energy that doesn't resonate with yours.
So I would totally agree with that. And I don't know, as an energetic practitioner, I'm fully engaged and totally aware of the spaces and the energy within them, right? So meaning that when I walk into a house, I know that either it's either positive or negative, because I've walked into some houses, I could feel the hairs stand up on the back of my neck, and I've turned around and walked right back out. I will not stay engaged. And for me, all things have energy, right? So even if it's not the energy of the people, what has taken place on the land to me makes a difference too, right? So if a war had been fought or an accident happened on that particular land, also, to me, I feel the impact of that. The energy is not settled, and it may not have anything to do with the people who have lived there or had lived there or are living there, but it's the fact that the spaces all around us have this energy about it. So, you know, but as an architect, Ivy, is that the take on it, or is it slightly different because you are like a studier of spaces? You actually, you know, like work with spaces, create spaces, so on and so forth. How is it engaged for you, and how is it looked at through your eyes when it comes to feelings and when it comes to, you know, being able to feel safe in a space?
Yeah, originally with the profession, you know, we just come in and we dress up the place, you know, to suit the client. But during the years, I started understanding in a different manner, you know, when you're engaging with other cultures in terms of how they approach the space that they want to dress up, for example. And you start seeing that sometimes it doesn't have to do with the dress up. You have to feel that space. And that is the journey I'm doing at the moment. When I meet the client, I need to understand if the client feels okay in that space. Because sometimes a client will say it feels okay in the space, but depending in the reaction that they have or how they feel within themselves, then they start rejecting that space that they already created originally in the drawings. So, and that sometimes can be counterproductive, because when the drawing's already done, you know, you already ordered things, you know, the people are ready to move in to do the work, and then they start rejecting the space. So it has to do from within, how the person is feeling and the situations that they have gone through. That's how they react coming out. Their reactions comes out. So that's what led me to go into this journey. So in terms of, you know, storytelling their own feelings through their house, because once they start understanding what they feel, then they can be able to start, you know, feeling okay and comfortable in their home, and starting to put their home together the way that they like it, not the way that we as practitioners want to project to them that they want, that is the ideal for them. Because, for example, when they say I don't know if you're in tune with the yin and yang, you know, in terms of putting the house, how to look balanced, you know, but sometimes people don't go in that direction, depending on what they have been through. If, for example, a positioning of a bed or a positioning of objects, you know, it may suit the theory, but it doesn't suit the client. I don't know if you can relate with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sara Jane?
Yeah, it's absolutely, it is about going with what feels right for you. Every now and again I will move things around. And is it feng shui? And they say you shouldn't actually sleep with your bed opposite a mirror. I slept so many years with my bed opposite a mirror. I can't remember every house I think about. Oh, there's always been a mirror at the end of the bed, sort of type thing. Yeah, it's, you know, or a wardrobe or something. You know, sort of. But it's got to be. And I suppose, yeah, if you've grown up with it like that, you don't think about it, do you? It's just always been the same. So but if you want to change how things are, and it's where your front door's positioned and your back door's positioned and all sorts of things. I'm not fully aware, but I know the mirror thing to do with that. But go with what's comfortable. I know I've got ley lines running through the house. I'm not sensitive to them other than the fact I know they're there. But a friend of mine, she came into my last house and she would be sitting on the settee and she'd say to me, "Sarah, I feel so strange." And I doused on it. And I said, "That's because you're sitting on a ley line." She came to this house. She sat down and she said, "Sarah," I said, "Well, you're sat on the ley line again, aren't you?" It was hilarious. It was absolutely hilarious because going into ley lines, I'd sussed that there were ley lines going through that house. And I've got 2 ley lines going through this house and they cross. But so it is, there's energy all around. And it's being open to that, being aware of that, but it is being comfortable. Yeah, there's no point in saying you've got to have the television there and then you've got to put it where you can, but where is comfortable, where is going to make it a comfortable space. It is meant to be your home. And so that place should be somewhere that you can relax and unwind. And it's not meant to be a place that stresses you out.
You're absolutely right. And I'm sitting there listening to that, and I'm going, okay, so I know that your work, Ivy, entails like healing and working with people in certain spaces. So why don't you just bridge the gap for us in understanding how you approached spaces and then how that bridges into how it can heal or working with somebody to heal in certain spaces.
Okay. For example, there's women, there's women that, for example, they go through domestic violence. They go through traumatic events, and sometimes they can't be able to position themselves in certain places, even if they're in a new house. So it's knowing how to be in a new house, for example, or even in the previous house. You place them there, and then they revisit. They don't revisit in depth because sometimes it's not good. It's not good for them to revisit in depth, unless if there's another practitioner beside as well that can help in that journey. And normally I like to have an additional practitioner so we can go in depth, because it's good to go. You go in, they talk through what they have been through, so you can be able to begin to jot things down where the thing went wrong, and then their own perception of how it went. Then you extract. Then normally we must start extracting those experiences and start to make it a new kind of story, if you can relate in that aspect. So they begin to revisit that story, reimagine it in a different manner, and taking fragments of those stories going forward, because we're trying to move them out from that place of how they used to feel, and they're creating new experiences and new feelings in that space. So we actually extract that, put them in a space as well, so they can feel it again, and sometimes as well, the patients or the people, they get into a deep trance. Sometimes they get into a deep trance that they cry, they go through those emotions, and then sometimes it doesn't have to even to do with what they actually experience in the house. It has to do with their, like, when they were little, that they carried over to those houses, and then which actually started in terms of creating new kind of stories within it. And sometimes it can go very, very in depth. And so to pull out from that particular experience, that's where the joy is, because then we pull it through art therapy, because that's what we do. Through art therapy, then they start beginning to see their life as a new beginning, a new experience that they will be reliving in their house. And we extract it in a manner that they don't start feeling that they're traumatized in a way, and they start experiencing it like you're embracing them, giving them a hug, and then they start beginning to settle in a way. Mm-hmm. That's how we see it. But I won't go in depth in it live, because it's not good. It can trigger some people that are living it or still reliving it. It's something that we do inside the practice, and we do it with a fellow practitioner, for example, a therapist or a psychologist.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
No. I hope I didn't go too in depth.
No. Sort of, I think both Enolia and I totally get what you're saying, don't we, Enolia?
Yes, very much so. In the respect that, for me, it's like I've never encountered spaces that way, right? So, and actually, I think what Sara Jane and I are both doing is just thinking deeply, because I'm sitting here going back to my childhood. Now, if I walked into my childhood house, I remember everything, all the good things, and then some of the not so good things. And it's like I never thought about doing anything to resolve the happenings and the residual of the memories that I had there that I need healing from. And this whole concept is really, really beautiful, because that space holds that energy, and it holds that residual of what took place. And, I am an artist, and I know that when I do my art and I sketch and I paint, right? I always take pride in the fact that the sketching and the painting informs me when it's done. Like I'm so connected to it. And then I'm sitting here thinking, wow, art therapy, what if I was painting the house and that house is talking to me? And here it is, I'm going through this range of emotions of things that took place, some positive, some negative. What is it that I really need to heal? And how do you determine that? I mean, like, we know some of the most obvious things, but how do you determine how to heal, which issues to address? Because I could think a few run-ins with my father. My father and I were very, very we clashed. We clashed all the time. I had wonderful things, but I had my moments with my mother too, when she drew the line and the boundaries were there, and she was like, no more. So I've had my trauma, what I would term is like my trauma in the house. And I'm sitting here going, these are, at least when I was growing up, the norms, the actual norms of what you experienced in childhood, at least in our family. But it was still traumatizing. And it's like, how would I address that? And so I want you to share with me, how would I address that? I'm thinking about a couple of times when, like, I remember being so fresh with my mother. She just went pow. And she hit me so hard. I hit the floor. And I remember that I had pushed her past her limit. And she was like, let me tell you, little girl, I will take you out of this world before I'll have a child talk to me like that. I had pushed the lines way too far. And that has always stood out in my mind. That is always, always, always there. It traumatized me. It made me go, okay, Enolia's not speaking anymore because she pushed too far the boundary. How would I do that? What would it take for me to move through the art therapy, and where would I focus something like that?
So in that aspect that you talked about, the flow, now we're going to walk through a flow plan. For example, in the practice, there's different methods that we use. So now we're going to draw a flow plan in that space that you lived. And we're going to walk through those emotions there. And then for example, you're going to have to answer, how do you feel in that particular space that you are? And even if you lie down in that floor, for example, now in this current moment, how did you feel back then? How do you feel now? This is the things that you have to address. And then you begin to start extracting those emotions and taking the positive aspect of it, and even the negative aspects. For example, those negative aspects from it, you can actually counteract it, giving it a connotation. And then once you give that connotation, you can anchor it, and then from that particular anchor that you did the connotation, that the positive connotation, then you can start moving forward because you managed to reverse it.
Okay, because I felt totally powerless at the moment. I was powerless. I was on the floor and I was like, oh, what did I do? How did I get here? I knew how I got there. I crossed the bounds. How do I get back? How do I get back? How do I regain any composure, and how do I apologize? How? I mean, all of those were rushing through my mind, and it's so fresh that I could actually see myself in that spot right at this moment, right now. So, okay, you take me through a flow plan and I regain some composure. How do I project that, and what type of art would you have me do? What would you have me do art-wise?
The art therapy, the one that we're doing, for example, the neuroscience, neurographic arts. So that emotion that you are feeling, you have to release it on paper. You release it on paper.
Okay.
So we begin to understand how in depth is it.
Okay. Okay. And I can see how I can release it in paper, because I could literally draw me at the I'm telling you, I can literally draw me.
No, but you wouldn't be drawing you though. You'll be releasing.
Okay.
You'll be releasing a doodle. You'll be releasing a doodle, because it's like a discharge of him. Okay. Instead of discharging on somebody, you discharge on paper. So once you discharge, then you pause. You sit within that emotion. Okay. And breathe, because there's an artistry in breathing. Because once you breathe, then you can regain yourself. Then you concentrate in the action that actually happened. You stare at the paper, and then we have other exercises that you have to do around that. The wording of these things. You put the word as well inside of paperwork, but that is a more in-depth work. So once you're going to be working the whole thing through, then that is the art that you work on. And then we move to another exercise. That is you navigating your home. But in this case, navigating that particular space that you have been through that situation. And we start working it around. But we'll be using NLP, CBD, all this kind of different techniques, infused, so you can get that that sense of storytelling. Okay. And it starts settling what happened to you. And then you start as well being more relaxed and trying to have some sort of clarity. And then as well, once you have that clarity, then you can begin to move forward with both the positive aspects of what happened and the negative aspect. Okay.
Sarah Jane,
but that doesn't mean.
Okay. No, go ahead.
Sorry, that doesn't mean that you're going to give that space a negative, because we'll be walking you through that for you to pass through that negativity and start seeing that space like a positive place. And then as well, the kind of exercises that we do as well physically, just you starting to place some objects, positive object that is in your house, you place it up. The negative one that you feel that it brings you or triggers you into that particular moment that you relieve, we have to take it off from that place, from that space.
Okay. Sara Jane, what are your thoughts around this?
It's a very difficult one for me because I don't remember. And so there are going to be people like me who the trauma has been so much, and it was trauma at a very, very young age. And then there were lots of little things that then happened on top of that. And I was a very, very unhappy child. And a friend of mine said to me not so long ago, remembering things he'd done in his childhood and whatever. And I said to him, and he said, but you don't remember. I said, Trevor, I was so unhappy. Why would I want to remember? And his reaction was, good point. And it took me to the wake-up call of my broken jaw when I was 37, 36, 37.
Mm-hmm.
And it took to then, and the pain and the sleepless nights that generated, because it was 6 months of that made me so exhausted that actually I had to do something about the way I was living. And that did. Best thing that ever happened to me. But remembering my first marriage, actually remembering a huge amount of my second marriage, certainly remembering my childhood, there may be the odd little thing. And gratefully, it's more likely to be something that was happy, because, boy, I didn't want to remember the rest of it. But I can still make a home.
Yes.
And how, I don't know, even in those negative days, those people-pleasing days, I could make a home. Somewhere that actually, on the whole, I felt comfortable. But it wasn't a matter of, and I do remember the house that my ex and I bought together, my second ex and I bought together. This is my life. And it was just, we were looking at houses, and it was just like, actually, let's just go back to that one. That seemed okay. So there was no going into a house and having that feeling that it was the right one. And even buying this house, when I say was given to me by the universe, no, I have a dirty, great big mortgage. It was not given to me to that extent. But the house found us rather than the other way around. It never went on the market. Trevor knew the people that were selling it. And we've been here for just over 16 years. And I think, so I come at things from a very different perspective, but what you're talking about is still connecting with the younger aspect of the individual. And that is something that I am very much into. And I love the fact that you have another way of supporting people to connect with younger aspects of themselves. The understanding, when you said it wasn't actually about what happened at that point in time, it went back further. It was the experiences of earlier in their lives that unfortunately helped them to be put into the situation they actually ended up into. And what you're doing is helping them to hopefully never put themselves into that situation again. That healing journey of the younger self to the self of today, but the self in between. And I love the fact that different people find different ways to support, because the healing of the inner child helps all of us to become who we're truly meant to be. And I love what you're saying about supporting people who've got energy memories around spaces in property.
Beautiful. So I'm sitting here wondering, because I've known you for a little while now, and I've gotten to see all aspects with you, and I don't think I've ever asked you, how did you, as a practitioner, come across this, and how did you slide into this?
Okay. As Sarah Jane was explaining, the younger aspect, I came about this because once I was dealing with my own ordeal, because I used to rent houses, and it used to be an issue for my partner. Why do I rent houses in a yearly basis? Every year I had to move house, and because of that, until I addressed it, that's when I started understanding that there's something in depth in me that I really needed to address, and that means that I don't like to stay in spaces because in the same space for a long time, to a long period, because I had detachment because of my dad used to travel a lot, of family, so we never had a root in a place. So that's why every time I had to rent a place to feel new. So that's what led me to go and do more in research in depth, and plus other experiences that I experienced. For example, um, let me just have this example. For people that have been incarcerated, people that went to prison, for example, there's families like that the partner has gone to prison, and then the other partner has children or being as well, they have their own home. So the transitioning in between that partner that been into prison in a family home, for example, that has a lot as well to do with the spaces, because the other person has been in a very narrow, small space. Integrating that person in a family home is quite a transition if you have to look at it in that manner. They have their behaviors, they have their own traumas that they have been into that space. So bringing that into the family dynamics is quite it's quite a journey, I would call it. And then the person that is the person that the partner that came to live into the other partner that was living as well the same ordeal, because for example those people, not only the partner that is incarcerated, the other person indirectly is incarcerated as well, mentally incarcerated as well. So that particular person is in two states of incarceration in their own state of home that they are in, and the emotion that they are living as well, if you can understand where I'm going with this. So helping those family transit is another kind of services that we provide, different from what they lived from when they were small. I don't know if you can understand. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think that that's phenomenal, because we don't think about that. We don't think about what it takes for somebody who's been incarcerated for years and years and years, and they've been in a 2x4 space their whole life, and then all of a sudden their world is bigger, and that it takes integration, and it takes time to integrate into it. I never thought about that. And then also, a mindset, breaking out of the mind of it also. No, absolutely not. Never thought about it like that. These are important things. And then, so that also would actually bring me to ask you about, how do you deal with war veterans, right? When their world is too big and they want to bring it to a smaller space because of fear of dying, everywhere around them. Do you deal with that scenario also?
No, I particularly haven't dealt with that. I deal with more people that have been incarcerated, but that is an interesting point as well, an interesting angle, because those as well deals with a lot of things in terms of PTSD and the rest. So they themselves, they deal with what is happening outdoors and indoors. So that's why it needs other practitioners that are specialized in trauma, really, to be able to help when we are doing this kind of practices, but it's a different angle as well.
Okay.
You talk about incarceration, but don't so many of us actually almost imprison ourselves? We don't have to be incarcerated in a cell. We imprison ourselves because of our insecurities. Wherever the root of those insecurities are, it's that people pleaser, you're being scared to step beyond boundaries. And yeah, I imprisoned myself from fear of what other people thought. That is a prison. Never doubt that we actually can be our own worst enemy. And then you're talking about veterans, but who is our biggest enemy? For many of us, it is actually our own mind. Mm-hmm. So it imprisons us. It is our biggest enemy. It's
It's true what you're saying, Jen. It is true, because we have our emotional imprisonments, our psychological imprisonment, and our physical imprisonment. So by the time you deal with all this, and then you're in an actual physical space, and then other people as well inside that home dynamics as well are feeling the way they are feeling. So that's why it's good to bring awareness to this, into this kind of topic, because even when people that are going through that, they still have to go to the workplace. And that is another physical space as well, that you don't know as well what other people are coming there, and everybody's in one space as well, in a work environment. So that's why sometimes, for example, in the workplace, emotions erupts and you don't know what happens, meltdowns, burnouts. So it's good to bring this kind of topic for people to understand as well, that is beyond what is happening outdoors, because by the time everything is going on, they still have to bring it back inside the house. So giving them tools for them to know how to manage when they're coming back home, knowing that they have to compartmentalize each thing that they're living, and when they come inside their house, for the house to still be calm in a way, so those emotions can calm down, and compartmentalize the ones you need to compartmentalize, do away with the ones you need to deal away with. Yeah, so that is part of the navigation of the home.
Wow. And then the navigation at work is a serious one. So those scenarios when somebody becomes unraveled at work, because work represents something that is, it's not home, it's work. Work represents something that the space gives them a feeling that is not to their liking. So how do you deal with that when it's a scenario not more personalized, but more work-wise? Because I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so when somebody comes unraveled at work, that can be extremely, extremely dangerous. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen it in all kinds of extremes and scenarios. So how is that addressed?
Yeah, because that's what happens. Because if the trigger is there's a trigger already, and then the person goes to work. There's that trigger, and then coming back home. That's why you see a lot of domestic violence happening, because they don't have an outlet. So the only person that they can discharge is the person that is closer to them. And for example, in the workplace, the only person that they can discharge is the ones that's the least fortunate, or the one that is that they will consider that is the weaker link, and they find themselves in those situations as well. Or sometimes they find themselves as well in a situation there where they're unleashed in a place with somebody that is higher, Raki, and then they end up losing the job. Yeah.
I think it's a difficult one, because what happens in the workplace is actually, I suppose, it's mirrored, isn't it, from what's gone on in your life or what you've witnessed in your life. And it's that remembering that what we witness as children is what we think is the real world, is what happens out there with everybody. And we think that's how adults should be. So what we witness as a child, until we learn differently. And obviously, if you're a child that's been brought up, even if you haven't been abused, but you've witnessed abuse of either the mother or the father, because it happens both ways. We should never think that it's just men abusing women, because it's the other way around as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And
exactly.
It's helping everybody to understand that there is a depth to the story that goes back, with the majority of people, to their own childhood, to their parents' childhood, to their grandparents' childhood, and maybe back many generations. And the parents are behaving in the way they have witnessed. And it is helping people to break that chain. So if you are unhappy in yourself, or if and I think the majority of people that behave in that way aren't happy. They really aren't. They probably don't even like being that way. But it's that ingrained thing. That is what men are meant to do to women, or that is what women are meant to do to men. And that, unfortunately, is how so many people end up in abusive relationships, is because somehow they've invited it in because that is what they've witnessed and that is how they believe it should be. And so it's wonderful for everybody that works with people to support them to be able to open up to what they believed to be a right reality, although it felt very wrong, to the fact that it doesn't have to be their reality. Their reality can be something totally different, something comfortable, something caring, something truly loving. And that has to start within yourself and within your own home. If your home isn't a comfortable place to be, then you're going to struggle. So beautiful that you're finding a way to support people from a home aspect.
How does blessings and cleansing come into play for the home also? So, you know, I'm sitting here thinking energetically also that, you know, one of the first things that I do when I move into a space is I actually do a house blessing. I actually sage it, I clear it, I actually go through a ritual that clears the energy out of the previous owners, clears the energy out that might be residual, you know, left in this space. So how does that play a role? Does it play a role at all?
It can play a role, but I myself particularly, I don't use that method. Normally what I do is I bring in the client into the space and the client feeling the space. You can lie down on the floor, you can feel the walls, just to see their reaction. Depending on their reaction in that space, then you will know if it's suitable for them or not. And they themselves, they will see if it's suitable for them. But it's the act of them embracing that space in terms of lying down, sitting down, but being there on their own without no furniture there, that would be ideal. There's some houses that already have furniture, but there's some that already don't have much of a furniture, which is good. So they have to have that sense of space to see if they like to big spaces, small spaces. How do they feel? You know, even the material of the space, how do they feel? Because those materials has as well some certain reactions. Because there's something homes that the place looks beautiful, you don't see anything wrong, but the client will say, "Oh, I don't like marbles, for example, or I don't like wood," and you already had a reaction already, and the mood has changed. Everything. So, but the aspect that you're talking about, I don't practice that myself personally, unless if the client practices themselves, you know, in terms of cleansing their space, you know.
Okay.
But that's a good point.
So the people that you're working with, have they already bought these properties, or are you working with people who are looking to buy properties? Because obviously if they're feeling uncomfortable in that space and for whatever reason, I'm struggling that they'd have even bought it, but you know, hey, now we have a saying, now tis queer as folk.
No, the some people, they already have those properties bought. Some people, they want to purchase the property. And some people, it's not even about the property. You know, for example, people that live in the refugee camp, they don't have a property, but they need to divide the space, and they left their own space and to come on in a different space that they haven't never been in their life. You need to be there with them, try to manage those emotions that they have, you know, telling them how to navigate the new space, the new environment that they're in. So it's different kind of situations and scenarios. So it's not a particular scenario in itself.
Yeah. Well, Sara Jane, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't. I have found this fascinating, and I found it really interesting, because we are all different. We are all absolutely unique, but on the other hand, as much as I say we're all different, we're all unique. There are people out there. So anybody watching this, there are people out there who have had similar experiences to you.
Exactly.
You are not on your own. If what Ivy does, what I do, what Enolia does, or somebody else does speaks to you and you feel you require support, because you can, whatever has happened to each and every one of us, we have had our healing journey. We're still on it. I should think we're all still on it. You know, I'm not sure it ever really comes to an end, but we find ourselves being able to sit here and smile genuinely because we are in greater tune with ourselves. We are happier with ourselves and our lives, and hopefully where we live. We are comfortable with that. But having come from a space of being very uncomfortable, and I think that's the important thing, isn't it? There is somebody out there who has the right method, the right practice to start your healing journey. You may need to change those over the years. It's not necessarily going to be one thing and one person, but there are ways. So what is going on in your life? Where do you feel? Are you listening to this and thinking, is there something I could do? The answer to that is yes, when you're ready. And if there's something speaking to you, then explore it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're exactly right. And so I know we're coming up on an hour, and I would love to continue this conversation because I'm like, we're ready to dig and figure out more and figure out more. But before we kind of close things, Ivy, is there any tips or anything that you would leave our audience with, just in regards to working and approaching spaces this way?
It's all about closing. It's all about closing your eyes. You need to sense the space. You close your eyes, no matter what is happening. Close your eyes, feel the space, breathe. There's the artistry in breathing, but really breathing with intention, and then listening to the heart rate in that space. Depending on the heart rate, then you can begin to understand if it's a good situation for you or not. And as well, it's good to sense the space in terms of lying down. I love lying down because when you lie down, you can begin to understand the perspective. I don't know if, in terms of the angle or you see the whole space in itself when you lie down. And these are the minor tips, but it's good as well to appreciate the space that you live in. Because, for example, there is something fascinating for me in terms of a homeless person. I've heard about homelessness, but once you experience homelessness yourself, you begin to appreciate the space that you have. And I understand as well in terms of being homeless, the sense of responsibility that people that have homes feel. So I understand as well the anxiety of having a home. So that's a different thing as well. But depending on what you like, if you've been outdoors or indoors, but there's something about appreciation of that space. It's a good thing, in my own point of view. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome.
So is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to share before we finish?
If anybody wants to, talk in depth to understand, because this is quite a topic that people don't address as much, but if they need to talk, we are here. The three of us, we are here. And they can talk in between different, because we all so have something different to bring to the space, which is an interesting angle. Because, for example, Enola, she brings that angle of the spirituality within the home. This is something that is unconventional, but it's something needed. I understand the angle and perspective that Enola is talking about, but it's just in my practice, I can't put it in because the people won't understand it in that depth. So that's why, even in terms of the way you're approaching it yourself, Sarah Jane, it is good because you understood where this is going. So if people feel that they need to have this conversation, they feel they can contact us and we can work with them, because it's all about, that's why I say that I don't work on my own. I work with practitioners, fellow practitioners, because depending in this case of the person, that's the approach. But my own approach is an architectural approach and an artistic approach as an art healer.
And am I right in thinking that your website is hugsconsultancy.com?
Yes, it is. And there's a drop down with the coaching aspect. So it is Hugs coaching.
Yes, and I will make sure that for those of you that are watching the video, that you can actually just look under the web video in the information underneath. You will find the website for Ivy. You'll find Enolia's and you'll find mine as well. Ivy, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating view, a different way of working, certainly with something that I do, but I do so very differently, because it's not about space, it's about the inner child. But it's brilliant, because I love the fact that people are working toward, we're all working towards the same goal, helping people to live their fullest, happiest life. And I love that. So Ivy, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing with us in the program this evening, because we're all in the same time zone at the moment.
For once.
I'm in England, Ivy's in Ireland, and Enolia's in Angola, and we are actually all in what we call British summer time. So we're all in the same time zone. So thank you, Ivy, for joining us. Our next conversation is on Wednesday, the 25th of May. Trauma, the Hidden Dragon, with Mary Walken. I have a slight problem with the use of the word dragon, only because I connect with dragons and I love dragons. But I understand what she's getting at. So Mary's joining us next in a fortnight's time, and I have had an email from her saying yes, she's remembered. So we're looking forward to that. That should be an interesting conversation as well. So all our conversations are interesting. I love them all because they bring in different things, and you've brought in something so different tonight, Ivy. Thank you so very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. I hope that you have enjoyed that. Do feel free to connect with any of us, any of the other videos, connect with our guests. That's what we're all here for, is to support you. Love, peace, and light to you all. Namaste.
Thank you.
Bye.
Namaste.